go ahead and we'll try to get around and talk to you. But thank you so much. Hopefully we can do this again next year, CrowleyMass 2021, and have some equally interesting, fantastic guests. Richard, thank you. Michael Staley, both Richards, thank you. Michael Staley, Lon Milo. It's really been wonderful having you. It was great presentations all day. Sorry about the technological difficulties at the very beginning, but it is what it is.
It's a first.
It's a first. So we got to getting a little bit better of a handle on it. But take it away. It's your chance to talk to each other and enjoy a bit of CrowleyMass spirit. Be kind to one another.
Really well done.
Thank you, man.
93 from Montreal, that was well done. Thank you a lot, Chris, for organizing that event. Hopefully it'll be the first of many more to come. Hopefully one day I'll be able to go down there to SOMA also and be with you guys.
Yeah.
So for now, have a good feast. Enjoy CrowleyMass.
Thank you, man.
Cheers.
Cheers, brother.
Well, since no one's talking, I guess I'll jump in really quick. I did notice after I wrapped up that there were some questions in the chat box that I didn't get to see and talk to. My talk was over. I didn't want to be responding during other people's, during the last two talks. I just didn't want that. I thought that might be rude. So I figured I'd just wait till the end here. I kind of need to hop off soon to have dinner, but I thought before I do, if anyone who had questions is still with us, this would be a great time to get them in.
I have a question. It's regarding the Aleister Crowley as a human personality with a person of his time. I posted a link to the Zoom in a Moorish Orthodox church or Moorish Orthodox temple group. And the issue, the backlash that I got was related to Crowley's apparent racism and some of his quotations and things from his Confessions book and MAGICk Without Tears, and how to potentially reconcile some of these aspects of Crowley's historic personality and his paradigm of teachings and spirituality.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question. I think there's a couple of responses to that. I think that while you can go through and find quotes from Crowley that are problematic, and I certainly don't want to try to whitewash or deny that. One of the struggles I had in putting together this edited edition of Sword of Song is that there are, similar sorts of language that doesn't hold up as well today as perhaps it did in his time. But I think, but we also see passages within Crowley's writing where he does say things like, for instance, in the Book of the Law, where we read every man and every woman is a star. And he in other writings, I can't quote them off the top of my head here, but he certainly makes very egalitarian and inclusive statements as well. And I think that in any part of life, but particularly with following, Thelema, that we don't have to agree with everything that Crowley says, and we also see other examples of how, writers and their works can be, reclaimed through reinvention. One place I see that happening, for instance, is with the works of H.P. Lovecraft, who has written some very racist things, and yet we see programs like Lovecraft Country, which is kind of turning that on its head. So I think it's with writers and philosophers and visionaries, artists, and all that, there's a way of separating the artist from their work and finding value in what they write. And again, we don't have to buy the whole package.
Fair enough.
I have a question for you, Richard. Do you have any insight into Crowley's workings in Kentucky or at the Breaks Interstate Park, that sort of area?
No, he doesn't really say a whole lot in his confessions about that. And unfortunately, I think that was in the year 1919 where that diary is missing. So there's not a whole lot to kind of go on there, unfortunately.
I've got a question for you, Richard, if I may
Sure.
say. I wanted to ask about more the book that you mentioned in your talk on Absinthe, and whether Crowley at all was interacting with the various bands that came across. I think it was like 1910, 1915 in, I think, Italy, France, and Switzerland at some point, where it was banned in various countries, much, I suppose, much like the cocaine and heroin legislation came around, around that turn of the century era, and whether or not there was any particular kind of an occult usage or occult significance to absinthe in particular.
Gosh, I know that there's places where Crowley talks about going to Paris and having Pernod. But with Absinthe, that particular piece, I believe, was a poem that he wrote, and also an essay like on the old Absinthe house, things like that. And those are things that were written, I believe, during his time in America while he was down in New Orleans. And presumably at that point, that was still readily available. So I don't recall anything offhand about Crowley commenting on Absinthe being banned or unavailable, unfortunately. But there was, again, there was this movement, as you mentioned, internationally to kind of ban certain drugs as, which, again, I wasn't aware of the Absinthe thing, but there was the Dangerous Drug Act in the U.S. and the UK that followed just a few years later. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's kind of, I don't know, unfortunately.
That's all right. No worries.
I have a question. I'm in New York City, and I work around the block from a place where Crowley lived on 36th Street. And I went to go try to find the place, and I think it had been torn down, and just like a couple of months before I searched it out. And I think a hotel is being built there. And I'm kind of curious if you know anything about any kind of diaries when he was in New York. I know he went upstate and did magic up in upstate New York, of course, and people know about that pretty well. But do you know anything about his, or is there any way to access some of his diaries at that time, especially on 36th Street?
Yeah, I think, if you look or have access to the magical record of the Beast 666, which was edited by John Simons and Kenneth Grant, that pretty much covers his American period. And during that time, he lived at various, he moved around the country, but he lived at various places in and around New York City. There was a place in Washington Square Park where he lived. He was sofa surfing at Leon Edgar Kennedy's apartment at one point. So and the Amalantra workings were happening in New York City as well. So so there are certainly places that happened. You'd have to go back into those diaries, kind of find out the clues where he was at that time.
I'm kind of obsessed because right down the street is Keen's Steakhouse, where like famous people had eaten. Everybody had their pipes held there, and I'm so sure that if he lived on that street for any moment of time, that he got himself a pipe in that restaurant. So I'm determined to find out somehow. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm determined.
Do you know if historically, I don't know if the building still exists or if it's been torn down or if it's just changed hands, but I understand there's a place called the Brevoort Hotel, which
The what? Which one?
Brevoort. And that was a place that Crowley loved to hang out. I mean, I guess they had a dining room there that he frequented. That jumps out in my mind, just because in the new edition of Panic in Detroit that I finished working on recently, Crowley meets the book dealer Albert Ryerson at the Brevoort Hotel. But that was at least at the time, a very famous upscale sort of boutique, hotel. I just don't know if it still stands or if it's been kind of,
I'll look into it for sure. Thank you so much for your talk today. Really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you for attending. I know it's been a long day, so thanks for sticking it out. And again, I don't need to hog all the time here. I mean, we've got other people online as well, so feel free to ask them questions as well too.
Crowley race.
All good.
I
Richard,
just
talk
ask one?
away. I'd be interested to know more about the Occult. We mentioned Panic in Detroit, and I forgot to mention that when I was talking about your books, another wonderful book of yours. And I'd be interested in knowing more about Occult dosing people with peyote, and that you mentioned is in a unpublished continuation of his Master of the Temple, I think, essay that's not been published. You talked about it a bit in there.
I'm not recalling that particular passage off the top of my head, but if it's in the top drawer of your mind, feel free to elaborate.
Oh no, it was just you had a piece in there.
Aha, put you on the spot.
What do you think?
Put you on the spot.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, you had a part in there where Occult was in Detroit and giving people peyote that were potential candidates for the OTO. And I think you said he recorded some of the experiences in an unpublished, I think it was his Master of the Temple essay. I could have the title wrong of the essay, but it was some unpublished, it was like part 1, part 2, part 3, and it's an unpublished one that's in the OTO archives, I guess. Any recollection?
I do know that I can't speak to that particular detail. I just don't recall it off the top of my head, but I can just kind of give some surrounding detail in that in the Blue Equinox, the volume 3, number 1, continuation of that series that was published in Detroit, there was the first installment of a series called A Master of the Temple, which was the magical biography, basically, of Charles Stansfeld Jones, kind of mirroring, the Temple of Solomon the King that was in the first volume of the Equinox that gave Crowley's magical biography. And there does survive, the unpublished portions. Actually, number 2 of that series of the Equinox was actually printed at one point, but never bound, and those sheets were lost. But the contents are known and pretty much survive. And as you mentioned, that the continuations, or at least a couple other parts of that series, do exist in manuscript form as well. So yes, it exists. I just don't recall the particular details that you're referring to.
Okay, thanks a lot. Is there any way that those will ever get published? Like, you think that it would be in the collection of drug accounts that you were talking about, you were thinking of doing?
I don't know. I mean, I know there is a plan to reissue that Equinox Volume 3, number 2 that never saw the light of day. It's just the status of those things, I don't know. I mean, OTO has been trying to start up its own publishing company, and the logistics behind that are, I'm not privy to, so I'm not sure where things currently stand.
Okay, awesome. And thanks again for your presentation.
Yeah, certainly a lot of interesting projects in the works.
I have just one quick question for Richard. I know that you've seen, or I've seen from your posts you've seen the show Hellier. So I'm wondering your personal opinion on if there's any legitimate connection between Crowley and what is going on with that phenomenon.
Are you asking me, Richard, or
You,
Richard
Richard.
Davis? Okay. I have not seen Hellier, so I can't comment on that, I'm afraid. Sorry. I've heard of it, but I've not seen it.
Hello, I have a question for Richard.
Oh, hello, Richard.
Hello. So after reading,
Oh, Mike.
yeah, that's me.
Hello, drummer
That's
Mike.
me. Hi. I'm a little late in the conversation. I caught the beginning of it, but I had to go somewhere and I'm back. But now, after reading Night Side of Eden by Kenneth Grant, the drawings representing all these different kind of clyphotic monsters, as it were, that are in these like clyphotic husks or tunnels, as I understand them to be. Now, at first, when I started reading that, I thought those were drawings by Grant. But, after, reading, because, as labyrinthian as Grant's writing can be, sometimes I was like, oh, those were originally drawn by Crowley, and then I looked up the Liber where he, explored this clyphotic world, although it's not as detailed as Grant goes into it, because he obviously took it and just ran with it, and involved all his Lovecraftian and then later, obviously, his UFO and alien indoctrination to it to great extent. And but the only thing that I haven't come across personally is a kind of like abyss crossing, like aha moment where he kind of connects these worlds and decides to take the clyphotic world into his own. And if that was something that was done under Crowley's tutelage, because, I've read things about, Crowley's relationship with Akkad, and how Akkad, it kind of goes off the rails and he has this thing with some prostitute, and then he comes back and Crowley said, you just went through the abyss, my friend. And then, and then Akkad, of course, goes on, like, I'm not too familiar with his chronology of his writings, like when exactly he wrote Anatomy of the Body of God and all that stuff like that. But the only thing I would like to know, and just haven't come across in my studies yet, is if Grant had that kind of moment where he felt comfortable enough to take this clyphotic world into his own, and whether or not that was while he was under Crowley's tutelage as his secretary. And I was wondering if you did. I know that's a loaded question. Or
Yeah, I mean, it's too bad Michael's not still with us, because he'd probably be in a better position to answer that, having known Ken for as long as he has.
I'm sorry for being ignorant. Michael who?
Oh, Michael Staley.
Michael Staley. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, the guy behind Starfire, the publishing company that puts out Kenneth Grant's books.
Oh, okay. That's where that name sounds familiar. Now I remember.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, and then various other accolades. I mean, I guess you can find it online, but
totally.
But I mean, my sense of the secretarial relationship between Crowley and Grant is that that was a relatively short-lived thing, and my sense is that a lot of these ideas Grant developed over the years through his own independent study.
Yeah.
And I believe that's probably the case with the Night Side of Eden as well, but I can't say that for sure.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it seems like Crowley promotes your own interpretation of things, to be your own, to have your own, like, as much time as you have, of course, to devote to that kind of stuff, to come to your own conclusions about things, but only so many people have as much time or devote as much as like guys like Grant did, obviously. And it's just, it always like kind of, if someone actually knew Crowley, like how much, approval the guy would have, because like, some of the descriptions, especially some of the like chattering intonations he talks about when, invoking or evoking these clyphotic, demons, quote unquote, for lack of a better term for them, is so in depth, and it's just really impressive. And I was just wondering if you knew about any, connection there, if he had his blessing, so to say.
I mean, one thing I can just tag on to that is, if you have not encountered Linda Filorio and her Nightside Tarot, because she and her partner Fred Fowler went through a prolonged magical working in which they were exploring these paths, based on the Night Side of Eden, and she painted a series of major arcana cards for the 22 paths, and those cards and the accompanying booklet that kind of explains what they did is fascinating, if that's a thing that interests you.
Wow, absolutely. And that's Linda who?
Filorio, Faloro.
Orao?
Orio. Yeah.
Filorio. Okay. Well, thank you so much. That is definitely another step down the rabbit hole, or clothotic rabbit hole. But thanks a lot, man.
You're welcome.
Hello, Richard. Can you talk about Crowley and his relation to Fernando Pessoa in the visit to Hellmouth in Portugal? Thank you.
Yes. It sounds like you're familiar with that story, but when Crowley was that Hell's Mouth, or when he came to Portugal, he was in the middle of a very intense relationship with his current Scarlet Woman, Hani Yeager, and Crowley got an idea into his head to stage his own suicide, kind of as a publicity stunt, and also kind of as a way of wooing or making up to Hani for problems in the relationship. And so he, with Fernando Pessoa's help, they staged this stunt where he left a suicide note at Boca do Inferno, saying that, the mouth of hell shall not be as hot as yours, referring to, addressing this to Hani. And the Crowley's initial idea was that he would show up later at a German gallery opening for his art, and then people would be wondering, is this the mystic, or does he have a double somewhere? And so it was all essentially a publicity stunt on Crowley's part. The interesting coda to this story, however, is that Hani Yeager winds up leaving Crowley, and she leaves a suicide note for him. And previous biographers basically took this at face value, and this is kind of the source of these rumors about Crowley saying, "Oh, he drove all of his Scarlet Women to suicide," and there are none who committed suicide, because the only one who even left this note, like Hani Yeager did, actually was just pulling a Boca do Inferno on Crowley, and she left this note and then hightailed it back to home in California, and she turns up in public records, back in the States. So Crowley got fooled by his own joke in the end.
I've got another question for you, Richard, if I may. As it's CrowleyMass, and first of all, thank you very much for your talk. I came in around about half an hour after it started, but as we're celebrating CrowleyMass, the birthday of Aleister Crowley, 12th of October, I had to say this, and probably what I'm going to ask, but I think 10 days before, and I think 18 years before, but 10 years on this month, Arthur Edward Waite was born, who was obviously Aleister Crowley's arch nemesis from our previous conversation on this point. But the talk that you gave, you mentioned that there was only specifically 2 areas in Crowley's life where he was engaged with substances. I think
heroin specifically.
Heroin. But I think there was a I don't know where I saw it from now, but I think it was really early on in the Golden Dawn when Aleister Crowley was initiated as a member, I think in 1898 or thereabouts. The point I wanted to ask was, and I think I mentioned it in the actual chat, I don't know if you saw it, but it was about the Chancery Road rule, I believe it was affectionately referred to as.
Yeah, I did see that. I'm not familiar with the Chancery Road rule.
Well, I mean, I'll repeat for the benefit of the audience and anyone else who wasn't familiar with this, but I heard that he and Alan Bennett, who struck up a relationship solely on the basis of Alan Bennett requiring a place of residence in London. I think that Aleister Crowley was living somewhere near or around the Chancery Road, where I think it was near to, where is it, Blythe Street, which is where the Golden Dawn was initially had its place of residence under Mathers. Whereby
Blythe Street, as I recall.
Sorry?
36 Blythe Street, as I recall.
36 Blythe Street, yes.
Currently a takeaway place.
That's right, yes. That's right, what it is now. But I think the Chancery Road rule was that if you ingest certain substances in order to reach a certain state, and you find that it's not working efficiently or effectively as you would wish it to be, then you should increase the dosage until it does. I just wondered whether this was something that's an urban legend, in the sense that you do find many tracts, like I think it was what was his name? He died, I think, only last year. Chick Publications or Chick.
Oh yes.
You must have come across this. And as for my second question, it's the first of all how you opened up your talk about what was it that made you choose Aleister Crowley as a person to focus your report on all those years ago.
Back in high school. Well, I'll start with the first question. I'm not familiar with this Chancery Road rule, so it may be an urban legend. I mean, it's absolutely true that Alan Bennett was living kind of in a tenement, and Crowley offered to share his flat with Bennett, with the idea that Bennett was one of the more respected, if not the most respected, practical magician in the Golden Dawn, and that gave Crowley an opportunity to learn from him directly. So it kind of serves both their ends, and there are in fact diary entries where Crowley records doing some drug experiments. I think there's one where he actually talks about breaking a tooth, although I don't recall all the details around it. So that I'm familiar with. I just haven't heard of this Chancery Road rule where you have to take more and more. My sense of Crowley's early drug experiments, just from what I've read in his confessions and those diaries, is that at that point he wasn't terribly impressed with what he was getting. I think his more impressive results came once he found some of the psychedelics. And that's where in the Anhelonium Luini or the peyote, where he really kind of found the mind-altering sort of substances. So I if there is a Chancery Road rule, it's new to me. As far as why did I pick Crowley, I think at that point I was 16, 17 years old. I had discovered Crowley 2 years before when I was 14, and that was all about AC. So when I was told to pick a British author, of course I picked Crowley, because that's where my head was at that time. And
what was the item that first whetted your interest in him when you were 14? What was it one of his books, or was it an item that you came across? Or?
Yeah, well, it was essentially I had found the local metaphysical bookstore, and went there one week to buy a book of Nostradamus's prophecies. I went back, a couple of weeks later, and I bought Israel Regardie's The Golden Dawn. So you just imagine this, accelerating curve. And the next time I was there, the owner said, well, if you enjoyed The Golden Dawn, you really want to read Magical Theory and Practice.
Mm.
And, the rest, as they say, is history. I had actually, I was intellectually speaking, kind of a terror in high school because, the year before I was in a comparative religion class and we were supposed to do book reports. And so for my first book report, I did a book review of the Kama Sutra. And the teacher said, okay, I'll accept that as a religious text, but please, change your topic to something else, for future reports. So my next report was a book report on the magical record of the beast 666, which is basically Crowley sex diaries. And the teacher was like, okay, broaden your topic a little bit. So I don't know. I guess I was lucky in that my teachers nevertheless, tolerated and nurtured my unusual interests at that age.
One final question, just to make it 3 questions that I've asked you, is although we've spoken about it before and the nature of Crowley's relationship with weight, do you know whether there was any early interaction? You mentioned before the cloud upon the what was it now? Eckhart text. That's right. That was initially one of the texts that first galvanized Crowley's interest. But I wondered if the two, before they unamicably split and became very much antagonists towards each other, whether there was any relationship in relation to drinking, which is something that I only have come across in my studies of weight, which seemed to be very much a feature in his kind of mystical, magical life.
Weight was a drinker.
Oh, well, Weight was one of the things that I've uncovered, largely thanks to R.A. Gilbert and also a few other figures that I've come across on Weight, is that he did in fact form a secret society in many of the taverns around London, where they would read out quotes from Levy. They would read out certain tarot card instructions, which they then had as part of their order, called the Sodality of the the Sodality of the Shades, or Sodality of the Shadows, which has recently been made into an LP, I understand, by a musical group that I've chosen on that name. But focusing on Weight and Crowley, like, did they have any interaction that was pleasant, or was it purely antithetical from the get-go?
Yeah, I'm not aware of them having any direct interaction at all. Wow, but now I'm like imagining, like, I want to be a fly on the wall with the two of them just like knocking back.
Yes, that's right.
You're so pompous and wordy. Me? You're pompous and wordy. But certainly Crowley talks about how it's Waite's book of Black Magic and Pacts that talks about the existence of an invisible college, and that kind of what gets him interested in trying to find this so-called invisible college. And it's when he meets Julian Baker, while climbing in the Alps, that he feels that the Golden Dawn was this invisible college that he was seeking. So he does credit Waite for that, but otherwise, I mean, he's just relentlessly critical of Waite. But I've never seen any indication that they ever met, or crossed paths in any of the Golden Dawn temples or whatnot. So.
Okay, thank you very much, Richard. And I think I might have to call it here because it is nearly 2 o'clock in the
Yeah, I kind of need to get some dinner in my belly too, and I feel like I'm kind of hogging the conversation here. So I'm certainly happy to open the door to other people who want to chat.
Thanks, Richard. I want to
thank you, Richard, for tuning in. Have a good night, and I think with that, I'll probably also say thank you to SOMA Institute and to Chris for inviting me to be part of CrowleyMass, and for all of you for tuning in and sticking it out, and I hope you enjoyed it all. So thank you, and 93, everyone.
Thanks very much, Richard.
On. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, everybody. Wonderful presentations by all. Happy CrowleyMass. Hope to see you all again for 2021. We'll probably do it again. And thanks for joining in. And we'll be posting a recorded version of this sometime in the next couple of days or something like that. You can find it on my Facebook wall or go to Pot TV, and it should be up there. And you can check it all out again at your own leisure. Thank you so much, and sorry about the glitches at the beginning, but it is what it is, and boom, boom, shiv, everybody. Do as thou wilt should be the whole of the law. Okay, how do we shut this off? Okay, and.